Jeff's last lingering thought was about Amara, and whether she would eventually come across the note he had discreetly left for her. He pondered the extent to which he could keep such a clandestine revelation concealed. By day he played the role of a respected pastor, but by night he led a secret life as a swinger. Adum village was known for its piety. Pastor Jeff, revered for his moving sermons, preached about righteousness and God's love. Behind the holy facade lay a secret threatening to unravel his life and the lives of those around him. By night, Pastor Jeff indulged in pleasures that sharply contradicted his daytime devotion, seeking experiences in swinging clubs far from Adam, where anonymity reigned and desires were explored without judgment. Adam always admired Jeff for his moral uprightness. His congregation, consisting of Madu, an elderly farmer, and Ijoma, a young schoolteacher, found solace in his teachings. Jeff's wife, Amara, was blissfully unaware of his hidden escapades, but Jeff's heart was restless. Every time he returned from the city, guilt gnawed at him. He often stared at the ceiling late at night, wondering if he had become the very thing he preached against a hypocrite. The guilt was further compounded by the fact that his wife had no inkling of the man he had become. Amara was devout, dutiful, and devoted to their marriage, unaware of their growing distance. Though he had tried to stop himself many times, the allure of his nighttime activities was too powerful. It provided him with an escape, a freedom that his role as a pastor couldn't offer. But the shame that followed every night outweighed him, leaving him with a deep yearning for peace, which he could no longer find in the pulpit. Pastor Jeff hadn't always been this way. In fact, the thought of living a double life would have seemed absurd to him just a few years ago. But it all began the day he was caught in the dark web of deceit spun by the general overseer of their church, Bishop Naji. Jeff had looked up to the bishop, a man of immense influence whose booming voice could stir the deepest of souls during services. One late evening, after a particularly long church meeting, Jeff walked into the bishop's office to discuss plans for the church's expansion. But what he stumbled upon behind closed doors shook his faith. In the dimly lit office, Bishop Naji indulged in acts that went against everything the church stood for. The sight froze Jeff in his tracks. His mentor, his spiritual leader, was involved in the sins they preached against. The bishop noticed Jeff's presence, but instead of alarm, he was chillingly calm. Without hesitation, Bishop Naji approached him with an unsettling offer. "Jeff," he had said, his voice smooth and unwavering, "this stays between us. You're an ambitious man, aren't you? Keep this secret and you'll be rewarded. I see greatness in you, a future as my second in command." Jeff had stood there, unsure of how to respond. But before gathering his thoughts, Bishop Naji reached for his checkbook. With swift strokes of his pen, the bishop wrote a check of an unimaginable amount, pushing it toward Jeff as if it were a bribe from the devil himself. "This is just the beginning," Bishop Naji said, smiling. "There's more where that came from." Jeff took the check with trembling hands, a heavy pit forming in his stomach. He left the office that night with a mind clouded by temptation and guilt. On his way home, his thoughts were a storm of conflicting emotions. Should he tell Amara? Could he live with this secret? He stared at the check in his hand, its numbers blurring before his eyes as doubt and fear clawed at him. Amara greeted him warmly when he reached home, unaware of the inner turmoil tearing him apart. Jeff could barely meet her eyes as she asked about his day. He felt two versions of himself battling within the righteous man who had always valued honesty, and the man who had just accepted a fortune to bury a truth that could destroy them all. The following day, Pastor Jeff returned to the church. Standing at the pulpit, he clasped the edges and looked at the congregation. This conference was one of the year's most meaningful events, bringing together regional pastors to share messages of hope and faith. He was the main speaker today, delivering God's word with inspiration and passion. However, as he started to speak, his mind was filled with inner turmoil. His speech flowed effortlessly and seemed rehearsed, but despite his confident delivery, his mind was preoccupied. He sensed Bishop Naji's gaze on him from the front row, surrounded by other church leaders at the pinnacle. The burden of the hush money given to him by Bishop Naji weighed heavily on Jeff's conscience, imprinting itself on every thought. As he talked about being truthful and having strong moral principles, he couldn't help but feel the irony of his situation. His mind kept returning to that night, the check, the agreement with the bishop, the secret that troubled him deeply. His voice hesitated, but he quickly regained his composure, hiding the inner conflict that threatened to overwhelm him. As he concluded his sermon, the applause rose like a wave, but Jeff's heart sank. The man of God he had once believed himself to be was slipping away, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. Back at Pastor Jeff's house, his wife Amara had always been content with their simple life. She and Jeff had never lived lavishly, but their modest home in Adum had been enough. She had grown accustomed to their routine, with Jeff leading the church and her managing the household. They shared a quiet, uncomplicated existence. That was until everything changed seemingly overnight. It started with the new car. Jeff had come home one evening, surprising Amara with a sleek black sedan parked in their driveway. Her eyes widened in shock. "Jeff, where did this come from?" she had asked, half amazed, half suspicious. Soon after, the house upgrades came. New furniture, designer clothes, and expensive dinners in the city. The life they once lived, grounded in simplicity and faith, rapidly transformed into something else. Amara watched in disbelief as their modest living morphed into a high-standard lifestyle neither of them had ever dreamed of. Though grateful for the newfound prosperity, a nagging feeling tugged at her heart. She couldn't help but notice that Jeff had changed too. He seemed more distant and distracted, and when she asked about where the money was coming from, his answers were always vague. "The church has blessed us," Amara, brushing off her concerns, but his eyes told a different story, one of the secrets of burdens he wasn't willing to share. Unbeknownst to Amara, the wealth was not a blessing, but the price of Jeff's double life, and the weight of that truth hung over their marriage like a dark cloud, ready to burst. Jeff's visits to the city became more frequent, and with each trip, he sank deeper into the life he had once preached against. 3 nights a week, he would tell Amara the same story. He had been booked to spearhead an international church conference, and his presence was required. She believed him, trusting her husband, the man of God. But the truth was far darker than anything Amara could have imagined. Jeff didn't attend traditional religious gatherings. Instead, he spent his time in hidden clubs, engaging in activities that contrasted with his public persona. These secret nights were filled with forbidden pleasures that lured him deeper into their world. It wasn't just the clubs. Jeff had also become a frequent visitor to Bishop Naji's mansion. There, the lines between holiness and depravity blurred even further. The general overseer was no longer just a spiritual leader, but a fellow participant in the iniquity. Jeff had grown used to the luxurious surroundings of the mansion, where no questions were asked and no judgments were passed. Every time Jeff returned home after one of these nights, the guilt gnawed at him, but he buried it beneath layers of lies. He was becoming adept at deceiving Amara, his lies slipping quickly from his lips. "It's all for the church, my love." But the truth was that with every lie, every night spent in the arms of another man, Jeff was spiraling further into a life he could no longer control. Amara's suspicions had been growing. Though she tried to dismiss them, she trusted Jeff, her husband, and the man of God she had married. But strange things began to appear around their home, unsettling her. While cleaning their bedroom one afternoon, she found an open box of adult pads tucked away in the corner of their wardrobe. She stared at them, confused. They had never needed such items. Amara herself had long accepted her fate of being barren, unable to conceive. A few days later, she discovered a bottle of baby oil under their bathroom sink. This discovery left her feeling hollow. Her mind raced with questions, but she struggled to understand it all. Why would they have baby oil? It didn't belong to them and only deepened her sense of unease. When she finally confronted Jeff, her voice trembled with uncertainty. "Jeff, I've been finding things around the house. Things like adult pads and baby oil. Is there something you haven't told me?" She tried to keep her voice light, hoping for a simple explanation that would put her worries to rest. Jeff's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained his calm facade. He had grown skilled at crafting lies to cover his tracks. "Ah, Amara," he chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "It's nothing to worry about. The church receives all sorts of donations from our congregation. I've been meaning to donate them to charity. They must have been mixed in with some of the items I accidentally brought home." Amara wanted to believe him, and for a moment she almost did. But something inside her wouldn't let the matter rest. She smiled and nodded, but her trust in Jeff began to crack. She didn't know that Jeff had been using the pads and baby oil during his secret escapades. He was tangled in a web of lies, and each deception pulled him further away from the man she thought she knew. Jeff had always cherished his relationship with Amara, strengthening their bond through years of faith and shared devotion. But as his secret life in the shadows deepened, his once passionate connection with his wife began to erode. Every night they spent together in their bedroom now felt like a performance, a strained effort to maintain the intimacy that had once come so naturally. He tried to maintain their sex life, attempting to be the husband Amara needed. He would kiss her gently, whispering loving and devoted words. But inside, Jeff felt empty. The pleasure he found in his secret meetings with men started overshadowing his efforts to connect with Amara. The more time he spent at swingers clubs, satisfying his forbidden desires, the less fulfilling his moments with her became. Jeff feels very guilty about his double life. He knows that keeping this secret affects his love for Amara, but he can't help himself. His secret encounters with men bring him pleasure, but they also make it hard for him to be fully present with his wife. He tries to ignore the guilt, but every night when he lies next to her, he feels weighed down by the burden of his lies. Even though they are physically close, emotionally, they are very far apart. Jeff thought he had everything under control when he introduced Obina to his wife as a junior pastor in training. It was a clever lie that allowed Obina to be in Jeff's life without raising suspicion. Amara welcomed Obina into their home, treating him with kindness and hospitality. She admired her husband for taking on the mentor role, unaware of the deeper, darker truth that Obina was not just a junior pastor, but Jeff's secret lover. At first, their secret relationship was exciting. Obina had been eager to be with Jeff, happy to play his role as the junior pastor by day, while indulging in the illicit affair by night. But as time passed, Obina's patience wore thin. He didn't want to be hidden any longer, so he was forced to watch as Jeff played the dutiful husband to Amara. Jealousy began to consume him, and soon enough, the relationship took a dark turn. One evening, as they sat in the secrecy of Obina's apartment, the young man's frustration boiled over. "I'm tired of sneaking around, Jeff," Obina said, his voice laced with bitterness. "I'm not going to keep playing the role of your junior pastor while you live this double life. I love you, and I want more." Jeff's heart raced as he tried to calm Obina, but his lover was no longer interested in sweet words or empty promises. "You need to choose, Jeff," Obina continued, his voice hardening. "Either you divorce your wife and come live with me, or I'll tell her everything. I'll tell the entire church, and we'll see how long you can keep up this holy act." Jeff pleaded with Obina. "Please understand, this is really complicated. I can't just abandon Amara. Give me more time and I'll find a solution." That night, Jeff left, feeling the pressure of the ultimatum. His double life was in danger of falling apart, and he realized that no matter what choice he made, he was going to lose everything. Jeff returned home late that night, his mind heavy with his decision. The house was quiet when he entered. Amara had already prepared dinner for him, and he ate silently, each bite feeling like it might be his last. Afterwards, he went upstairs to their bedroom, his heart pounding with each step. Inside the bedroom, Jeff opened a small secret compartment hidden in the wall behind the dresser. He placed a handwritten note in it, carefully folding it before sealing the compartment again. He took a deep breath and sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of his choice pressing down on him. Amara walked in shortly after, sensing something was wrong. She sat beside him, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. "Jeff," she said softly, "what's going on? You've been so distant. Is there something you need to tell me?" Jeff looked at her with eyes full of sorrow, his voice thick with emotion. "Amara, I need to ask you something. No matter what happened, could you ever forgive me?" Amara frowned, her heart racing. "Jeff, what are you talking about? What happened?" But Jeff said nothing. He kissed her on the forehead, stood up, and left without another word. Amara called after him, but he was already gone, disappearing into the night. Jeff is now on a damage control. Bishop Naji, who introduced him to the world of swingers, his secret lover, Obina, his beloved wife, Amara, and his reputation in the community. And so he sets out on an unpredictable mission.